Hello, this is Jerry Morton. Welcome to my Finding My Way podcast. This is podcast number 50, titled Make Way. Podcasts 34 through 61 are stories from the year of Army training I experienced. The training started in August 1966 and ended in June 1967. The stories are published in the book Reluctant Lieutenant, From Basic to OCS in the 60s, which was published by Texas A&M University Press as a military history. Make Way is an account of the first weeks of OCS in early 1967. Jerry learns to navigate the daily routines and how to manage the harassment of a senior candidate. It is recommended that you listen to the Army training stories in the order in which the podcast numbers present them, so that you can appreciate the full contextual richness of the later stories. 5 days in a row is too much, said Mel Wolfe. The tall, lanky native of Washington State was speaking for the whole group. We are the only platoon that has yet to pass a morning inspection. That's right, Tom Kitch agreed. All of the other platoons have slush funds. They're buying liquid floor wax, good latrine cleaning supplies, and things to spiff up their bays. We're the only ones not doing it, and we're the only ones failing inspections. I really respected Kitch. He was the only true NCO in our platoon, a real sergeant who had spent time in this man's army. He was the old man of the platoon and had a wife and 2 kids. Go ahead and do it, said Eric Fiedler. We all trust you. Eric was probably the strongest man in our group. The TACs had already selected him to be the company guidon bearer. We had tried everything we knew to clean up the bay, but no matter what we did or how long we worked after lights out, it just was not good enough. Every lieutenant in the company had been in to inspect us except our own tactical officer. They had just ripped us apart. The floors were dingy, the shower heads did not shine enough, the mirrors failed to sparkle, dresser tops were not polished to a high enough gloss, and on and on. The captain said slush funds were absolutely not allowed, I reminded everyone. Every platoon has one, Kitch insisted. They couldn't pass their inspections without it. I let out a sigh and said, Okay, I'll run the slush fund. You guys have to protect me. Don't worry. We've got you covered, Jim said in that ironic tone. Then he rolled his eyes as if to say, my ass was grass. We all laughed. He was a good man. I want to be very careful with this, I explained. We have to keep track of the money. None of us has any to spare. I'll open a separate checking account. When we collectively decide to buy something, we all have to share in paying for it. I don't want to be holding a lot of somebody else's money in the account. So we'll have our agents buy the items and then reimburse them. I'll assess everyone an equal share, collect the money, deposit it in the account, and then write him a check for the exact amount. That way, I'll always have a record of what money came in and where it went. Okay, said Scotty. But what happens if we need to get a big ticket item? I mean, what if nobody can afford to pay for it up front? Good thought, I responded. If we agree we need to get some expensive stuff, we can always collect the money first. Then we can pay for it straight out of the checking account. It was agreed that was how we would operate. One other thing, I said, interrupting the general murmurs of agreement. We don't want a lot of people spending the slush fund money. That's sure to end up in confusion. Let's designate just a couple of guys who can buy things for the rest of us. Scotty and Gary volunteered to be our designated purchasing agents. Others would serve as backup if either of them were unable to go to the PX or wherever. At the present rate, we were never going to pass an inspection, so no one would ever go beyond the first PX anyway. Fortunately, there was a branch bank at the PX, as well as such conveniences as a barber shop and stamp dispenser. The downside was that it was 5 miles away. No one had car privileges. For that matter, we had fewer privileges than any of the other platoons because of our failure to pass an inspection. During those first few days, we spent our free time getting our uniforms tailored and laundered, buying our OCS insignia, spray painting our helmet liners glossy black, which identified us as beginning candidates, stenciled our names on our t-shirts, underwear, and on anything else that was loose, obtaining basic clothing supplies and field gear, and on and on. The post office was in the opposite direction from the PX. It served a lot of OCS companies, probably the whole battalion and then some. We were each given a post office box. Everyone had his own box. It was nice and private. The only trouble was that they never gave you time to get your mail. There was never a point at which they said, "Okay, guys, you have half an hour to go check your mail." Every minute was taken up with getting ready for the next inspection. Any time spent going to the post office, PX, or getting a haircut was lost time. We spent the bulk of the workday going to classes or taking our rifles to the firing range to get ready to qualify with them. No one was willing to spend any time helping you zero your weapon. When the time came to qualify, you had to qualify. If you failed, they would pull you out and make you do it again. There was no time to do it over. You would lose the time you had to polish your shoes, shine your belt buckle, polish your OCS brass, get a haircut, and so forth. Since you did not have time to do all of this stuff in the first place, having to take time to go back and go through the qualification course again would not be good. As it was, if you went to the PX or somewhere else, it usually meant someone in the platoon would have to do a chore to help you out. Thus, volunteering to go to the PX to buy window cleaner for use on the shower room mirrors and the platoon bay windows meant that someone else would have to polish your shoes for you or put your OCS brass on in the exact Army way, and on and on. Few of us had mastered the exact Army way of pinning the OCS brass on our collars. All of us had been dropped repeatedly to knock out 50 because the little OCS pins were imperceptibly fractions of an inch off from the Army way. A couple of the guys were getting the knack of it. They spent a lot of time helping the others. Already, we were set to take our first written test on the classes we were attending. The last hour and a half before lights out was designated for study time. The TACs would spring into the platoon bay, trying to catch someone doing something other than studying. My most immediate pain came from fingerprints on my belt buckle, my dress shoes not being spit shine to a high enough gloss, or my cubicle floor not reflecting the TAC's face bright enough. I was not stupid. The Army clearly wanted those things more than they wanted me to max the tests on how to lay a World War II minefield. My strategy for getting details done during mandatory study time was elaborate. I put the shoes I was going to work on that night in the bottom desk drawer, along with my little cotton balls, small container of water, and black shoe polish. I then covered the desktop with notes from class and the applicable Army manuals. By placing a pencil in the crease, I could quickly open them to pages that would match my notes. As soon as I heard the bay doors open, I would drop the shoe I was working on into the open drawer, quickly push it shut, being careful not to slam it, and turn my torso so that my head, hands, and arms were over the book or notes by the time the tack had made it within eyeballing range. The whole maneuver required split-second coordination. By doing my personal details for the morning inspection during study time, I was able to crawl in bed at lights out. Many of the guys took flashlights under their covers after lights out to complete various tasks. I never did that. I needed my sleep too badly to miss it. Lost sleep was always a problem. From the very beginning, the tacks would patrol up and down the aisles of the large lecture halls we sat in for most of our classes. Hardly an hour would go by when a tack did not spring into a row of candidates to grab one who had fallen asleep during the lecture. The hapless fellow would be dragged out of the row, falling and tripping while knocking books off the continuous desktop for that row. In contrast to the droning of the instructor on the stage below, the commotion and crashing sounds were startling. The desks were arranged in an amphitheater fashion with chairs bolted to the floor. Their backs were like the slats in a picket fence. The victim's body bouncing off of them made an almost rhythmic sound. It must have been standard operating procedure, SOP, for the instructors, as they never seemed to interrupt the monotone flow of their words or their use of charts, pointers, and overhead projector slides, while the still drowsy fellow was dragged out of the classroom. A couple of the guys really took the classes seriously. Gary Queen's dad was rumored to be a police chief in California. He wanted to be an MP. He figured that the only way it could happen was for him to get the best grades in the company. That might give him a chance to get transferred out of the infantry and into the MPs. Another guy was studying pretty hard, but I did not know why. Maybe he just liked to study. He had a master's degree in English, they said. The word was that he wanted to be a diplomat when he got out of the Army. As for me, I just wanted to get through it all. They were not laying many World War II minefields in Vietnam. Learning information did not seem like something I wanted to invest a lot of valuable time in. I needed to pass the test, but I sure did not need to max it. I needed to pass the test, but I sure did not need to max it. I needed to keep the tacks off my back. The only way to do that was to spit-shine shoes and floors, polished belt buckles, OCS brass, and chest of drawers tops, and so on and so forth. When they started teaching stuff like how to call in artillery fire, well, that was different. Several guys had told me that no one was getting branch transfers out of infantry. I would try my best to learn those things that were going to keep me alive. For now, reducing my pain during morning inspections was my highest priority. The word was that guys with B profiles would be given priority for getting branch transfers out of infantry. Up to 10% of the company would be considered for branch transfers. 30% of the company had B profiles. A B profile meant that something was not perfect with your body. I had an A profile. All of my body parts seemed to function within the Army's normal range. My chances of a branch transfer to the Medical Service Corps were looking bleaker than ever. The morning after buying liquid floor wax, furniture polish, Windex, extra strength Babo, and other cleaning supplies, we passed our first inspection. The Army has a way of teaching you about important things. "Make way!" a loud, strong voice demanded from one end of the cubicle near the doors to the platoon bay. "Make way! Senior candidate in the hallway!" We sprang to attention. It did not make any difference that some of us were half-dressed or engaged in multiple activities. Up to this point, we had escaped the harassment from senior candidates, those who were in the final phase of OCS and close to graduation. They had hit several of the other platoons, but not ours. The robin's egg blue helmet liners perched cockily on their heads distinguished them from us underlings. No one dared move. Anything that drew attention to you meant harassment. Swiftly, 5 of them swooped into the platoon bay. 2 of them immediately focused on one candidate in his underwear. "Why are you out of uniform?" screamed one of them into the man's lowered face. Just as quickly, the second senior candidate positioned himself so his mouth was next to the underling's right ear and shouted, "You don't have your dog tags on! You don't have your dog tags on! If this building collapses, how will I know whose mama to call? She'll want to know her baby's dead. Don't you love your mama, candidate? Don't you love your mama? Answer me, you ungrateful child." "Sir, yes, sir," the red-faced candidate shouted back. In a mocking, sing-song manner, the senior candidate repeated, "Sir, yes, sir, what? Do you or don't you love your mother?" The buck-eyed wretch shouted out as loudly as his oxygen and depleted lungs would allow, "Sir, yes, sir, I love my mama, sir." While this little drama was unfolding, the other 3 senior candidates moved down the aisle, shouting at various junior candidates as they went. Nate had the misfortune of being just outside our cubicle when the blue-capped bird swooped in. His back was braced against the partition. I stood as rigidly still as possible in the little passageway, looking down the aisle and directly into the side of his head. Just one of them made it down the passageway far enough to confront Nate. "You're smiling, candidate?" a short, stocky candidate blared into Nate's face. Nate's little grin grew into a full-blossomed smile. Poor Nate was in for it now. Shouts and counter-shouts from other candidates filled the air, but they receded into the background during the time-frozen seconds that we focused on Nate's apparent undoing. The violence of the words elsewhere bounced off Nate and me and those nearby. "You're mocking me and the whole U.S. Army!" the big red face roared. Scotty rushed up to the senior candidate and screamed into the side of his red spider-veined face, "Sir, Officer Candidate Newsom requests permission to speak, sir." Before Nate had a chance to reply, although his smile had disappeared, the senior candidate turned his head to look at Scotty standing at attention with confrontation gleaming from his eye. I sprang from my position, pushed up against the senior candidate, and exclaimed, "Sir, Officer Candidate requests permission to speak, sir." My last words were drowned out by the same demand being made of the senior candidate by 5 or 6 others from the platoon. We had him surrounded. Our continuously repeated demands, made as loudly as we could into his face, drowned out his response. We had him trapped. He was surrounded. I looked up to see what the other blue hats were doing. To my amazement, none of them were in the bay. They had left the sky. He was trapped, alone, without any support. He began laughing. It was a genuine laugh. That was what stunned us into silence. Good job, he declared. Way to come to the aid of your own. Excellent. At ease, he said to Nate. Looking over his shoulder, the blue hat saw Junior for the first time, as did the rest of us. Standing on the top bunk of his cubicle, Junior had his shoulders pressed against the ceiling beam. His arms were grasping the beam, which he was pressing into the wedge of his back. The massive muscles of those arms were strained to maximum expansion. He had huge biceps. "Get down from there," ordered the senior candidate. "I can't, sir. I'm holding up the ceiling. If I let go, the whole building will collapse, sir. We'll all be killed, including the highly regarded senior candidate, sir." "It's true, sir," shouted his cube-mate Mike in support. "I heard them cracking just before he jumped up there and saved us all." We all roared with laughter. This was just too good to be true. The senior candidate joined in. He was truly tickled. "You guys are all right," he said. "You know how to stick together. It will help some of you make it. You know that at least a third of you will drop out." "Sir, no, sir," shouted Scotty. The rest of us picked up his cry of protest. "Oh, okay, the blue one laughed, raised his hand for silence. As we quieted down, he continued, "The only way you'll make it is to help each other. It's remarkable that you've come together this quickly. Maybe you are right. Maybe all of you will make it. I don't believe it, but you can hope. You've come this far and you don't even have a tactical officer." That was news to us. We had not seen Lieutenant White for several days. No one had thought anything about it. Lieutenants from the other platoon had been in and out of the bay. The other lieutenants had not ignored us during inspections or in the dining hall. It was the way things were. We knew no other way. As far as we were concerned, different tacks shouting at you was SOP. "What happened to our tactical officer?" someone asked. "He was reassigned, is all I know. You're supposed to get a new one in about a week. I've got to go now. You guys take care. I'll try to come back in a day or two and see how you're doing. Maybe I can help some of you make it. Hell, maybe I can help all of you make it," he said with a grin and a wave.